and I'll introduce you.
Okay.
So welcome everyone to another in the series of global reentry webinars. Until now, we've been focusing mostly on careers, but the idea is that we will introduce additional topics that are important to the volunteer community, especially those recently returning and evacuated volunteers. And today's topic by popular demand is to discuss MPCA's advocacy work, especially in the changing times that we're in right now. A lot of the discussions that we've been having recently, including a great discussion with RPCV Washington, DC, and with all of our affiliate groups on Saturday. A lot of the discussions have been revolving around advocacy actions and how RPCVs can get involved and even lead advocacy work as part of your community. So we are lucky to have here today Jonathan Pearson and Joel Rubin, two of our advocacy staff here at MPCA, and I'll let them introduce themselves a little bit further in a second, but I just want to say how fortunate we are to have both of them as part of our team. I'm relatively new at MPCA. I started off with the beginning of global reentry about 2 months ago. And I have to say, as a longtime follower of MPCA, I participated in my first advocacy days on Capitol Hill at the beginning of March as part of Peace Corps Week. And I think everyone who is a part of that effort would also recognize Jonathan, especially for his amazing work in leading what we do for this community. What he does is, until recently adding Joel as a second member of the advocacy team, what he has done as a one-man shop is the work of 3 or 5 people at any other nonprofit, in my opinion. So we're lucky to have him join us today, and he'll go over the agenda and introduce himself a little bit now. I'll just add again before turning it over that we also have Jody Hammer on the line, the Global Reentry Career Services Specialist. She'll be monitoring the chat and making sure that Jonathan is fed any questions and comments that you might have, since he's going to be presenting his screen. He might not be able to see it as easily. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. On the participants tab, it's a great way to respond to yes or no questions. So we get to see how many people are answering to any questions he might poll the group with. And I will turn it over. Thanks for joining.
And thank you, Dan and Jody, for all your work with this new global reentry program. And thank you to everyone who's joined today's conversation. I am Jonathan Pearson, Advocacy Director. I was a Peace Corps volunteer who served in Micronesia in the late 1980s. And as you can see the agenda here, as you are typing in the chat and introducing yourselves, again, if you just joined us, let us know what city and state you're from, and also let us know off the top if there's anything in particular you really hope to come away with from today's program. And this is the agenda, and I think we're gonna jump right into it, and here we go. What is advocacy? Often people, people are familiar with the word lobbying, and in a sense that is what we do. We're citizen lobbyists, but we often use the word advocacy, and this is the definition of advocacy: working to try to address change with particular causes or policy. And it's a really critical moment right now in so many ways. Probably the most critical time in Peace Corps history, with the unfortunate, and you have experienced this firsthand, the evacuation of 7,300 volunteers, the first time in 59 plus years that there hasn't been a Peace Corps volunteer overseas. And this poses a potential threat to the future of the Peace Corps, and that's something we need to be vigilant about. And we're also converging on so many other critical moments in our history, from the pandemic to the issue of racial injustice that has always been there, but then has burst upon the scene once again with the recent killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the demonstrations that have been occurring and all the effort that is underway to try to bring about true change and true end to injustice. So we bring all those things together, and it's a critical moment. And you as evacuees on different levels in different ways are going to be critical voices moving forward on these various fronts. And so we really appreciate the work that you already have been doing. And we're going to hear very shortly from some great evacuees who've already been doing great advocacy work, but also want to thank you for the work that we are sure you'll continue to do. Before I turn it over to some of our guest speakers, I just wanted to briefly go to a couple of sections of our website to share just a couple of our resources that are key components. We won't take you through all of our advocacy pages on our website. Some of them need to be updated, quite honestly. But I wanted to show you two particular places where you can go on the advocacy front. So first of all, we have a section called State by State Resources. And over time, we have tried to create a section here whereby people can find information particular to their state. And so we've got all the states listed here alphabetically, and we try to provide information. Now I'm going to use California as just the example here, but this would be similar for if you were looking up Colorado or Nebraska or Maryland or Florida or whatever state. So under California, first of all, we have a line here that says Congressional Delegation. And what we've done is we have an outline of every member of Congress from California or whatever state, and trying to provide some basic information, much of it pertaining to Peace Corps. So this is Senator Dianne Feinstein, and we list, what's the history of Peace Corps volunteers in California, where her state offices are located across California, who's the key staff that handles foreign policy issues, what's the meeting history between Senator Feinstein and the Peace Corps community. You can see she's met with the community many, many times. She was the recipient of one of our Congressional Leadership Awards this year. And then we also have on the second page, how do your lawmakers stand on Peace Corps issues, whether it's funding for the Peace Corps or different pieces of legislation. Some of you I know, and one of our guest speakers spoke specifically to this issue. This is the one that the Peace Corps Mission Accountability Act would oppose or would threaten Peace Corps independence. You can see she's not currently a co-sponsor, thank goodness, but she has co-sponsored other bills in the past. So for every member of Congress, and I will note, the date here is updated February 2020. We are in the process of updating these now. Hopefully sometime in July, we will have updated all of these state resources. So you'll have updated information. The other thing, and we don't have this for all the states yet, but we hope to soon. But we do have one for California, and it says California and the Peace Corps Summary. So if I flip on that, we basically have a one-page document that just goes into a little more detail about, what's the history of the Peace Corps community in California? How many volunteers over the last several years? And then we look back at one of the historic high points, 1967, and how many people were serving from California at that time. Then we have just some facts about, educational partnerships, or some of the great work of the affiliate groups that hopefully you're becoming familiar with. On maybe a fun fact, a well-known director, Taylor Hatford, is a returned Peace Corps volunteer. So something to just try to personalize these documents when you're meeting and talking with your lawmakers. So we've got those items. And then I'm going to try to go up here and see if I can find our action items. Let's see. And you can see, so we've got a lot of different information in here. Here, let's see, let's try this. Hopefully this gets me there. I'm sorry, I was gonna, yeah, this is it. So we've got another page here, and all I wanted to do is show you is this is our action link. If you go to our homepage and right at the top, there's a link to advocacy, and it says take action, and you're a couple of clicks away from this. And this is our automated system whereby it tries to help expedite your ability to write letters to your members of Congress. So some of you have probably already taken action in the aftermath of the recent turmoil in our country. We have posted an action. We've left it pretty wide open. These actions you can, we allow for editing. We encourage editing. We encourage your own voice. But you can go to this page and see what different actions we have posted at this time. And so we have several up here dealing with COVID-19 legislation, one also in support of the overall international affairs budget, and then one again dealing with the issue of racial injustice. So I just wanted to give you a little glimpse into that. And with that, I'm gonna move on to some of our guest speakers because again, it is, I really appreciated the things that Dan said, but it really doesn't mean anything without the participation of our community. And we wanted to highlight some of you today, some of your fellow evacuees. And the first person I'm gonna call on is Vanessa Gomez, who was with us during our National Capitol Hill Day of Action back on March 5th. We had such an incredible and passionate turnout from volunteers who had the first evacuees from China, and Vanessa was among those. And Vanessa, share your experience being up on Capitol Hill that day. And you'll need to unmute yourself probably.
Can everyone see me?
We can hear you for sure. I don't know if everybody can see you with the screen up, but.
I can see you.
Okay, awesome. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Vanessa. Thank you for the introduction, Jonathan. So yes, I was one of the Peace Corps volunteers from China. And when I heard about the event, it happened very quickly. You know, the China program ended on February 6th. The Advocacy Day event was March 5th. So for me, I really didn't know if I wanted to get involved because I was just processing with everything that had happened with China and the Peace Corps program and ending there as well. So I guess the reason I did join the Advocacy Day in March 5th was really because I thought back of why did I join Peace Corps and what did I want to share about China and my service there, as well as taking the opportunity to speak to my senators, my representatives. And I thought this is just a great opportunity that I couldn't really say no to. So then, yeah, I joined the event. And I really just have to say thank you to Jonathan and his team. He put together all the documents that were needed to really know what we were talking about, what we were advocating for. And he emphasized a lot of sharing our stories and what it meant to be Peace Corps volunteers, and specifically in China, what we gained from the time there and what we were able to give to the people there as well. So in the actual event, I am from Florida, so I had a meeting with Rick Scott, our senator. So that was interesting to say the least. Just to be put in the room with one of the persons whose legislation where we were obviously against, and just having the opportunity to share what my story was being a Peace Corps volunteer in China. And in that meeting, we also had the president of the National Peace Corps Association, Glenn, and he took lead mostly on the legislation we were advocating for and what we weren't in our points. and everything that Jonathan was showing in the screen as well, all those documents were present when we went to speak with our representatives as well. We saw their past, are they supportive of Peace Corps? All the details you really need going into those meetings. So I felt prepared, and I learned a lot. I was able to interact with so many returned Peace Corps volunteers there, both current, recent, and much older, like 10, 20 years. So it was just great to not only share my story, but listen to their stories as well. And just make our voices be heard, especially things that Peace Corps was advocating for, and us ourselves as well, since we support the organization, and just being present there. So it was a great experience. I hope to do it again, and encourage all of you as well to take part of this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. And I can see you now, so it's great
Okay,
to see
great.
you. Thank you so much.
No
The next item we wanted to talk about was an incredible survey that maybe some of you participated in, put out by the Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security, WACAPS, and a survey of evacuees. The person that made that happen is a fellow evacuee, Miriam Foote, who joins us here. And Miriam, if you could speak a little bit to how this all evolved, and also you took it to another level with a briefing on Capitol Hill. So I'm happy to introduce Miriam.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation. So I'm a former volunteer in Benin. I served from September of 2018 until I was evacuated with everyone else in March of 2020. And I worked in sustainable agricultural systems. And so I've been involved with WCAPS. It's Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security. And it's a network and an organization dedicated to supporting women of color who work in the fields of international security, peace, and etc. And so I've been working with Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins since I've come back. I've been working with this organization before I joined Peace Corps. And then when I came back, we were kind of in conversation because she wanted to know more about Peace Corps and what was going on, and how Peace Corps volunteers could also support US and national security, and how we could best support the program. And so I reached out to fellow volunteers, and we formed a team of over 13 volunteers from different countries, different backgrounds, different age groups, who had different levels of experiences within Peace Corps. And we basically worked together to create a survey and also spread it amongst the Peace Corps community, and received over 400 responses from the volunteer community in the report. And so with this report, we've been advocating, we've talked to Congress. I can't talk too much about the briefing because it was private, but we have been advocating in Congress. We've been talking and working along with Congress and lawmakers to kind of work through legislation and how they could best support volunteers. So right now we're still in the process of doing that and going back and forth, but we're still doing that, and that's the work that we've done so far.
Just one thing, Miriam, I know you can't speak to the specifics of the briefing, but one of the things about it too is I think some of the people that participated in the survey also participated in the briefing. Is that right?
There are members of the team. I think some of them might have individually participated in the survey if they wanted to. We kept all the results anonymous. So some of them could have also participated in it, but a lot of their input has been made, and like the findings of the report, also the recommendations that were also written and co-authored by everyone else that was on the team, which is over 13 volunteers. So it was like really work that was done with fellow evacuees by evacuees themselves. And then we also spoke to the report when we finished.
And if anyone here today or watching this later wants to, has not seen and would like to see a copy of the report, how might they do that?
It's on the WCAPS website, so you could go to wcaps.org, and it is on there. We have it also posted on the evacuee page. I could share the link once I find it into the chat as well, so that if you would like to, you could take a look at it. The report is really supporting Peace Corps as well. A lot of volunteers do want to return. They really prize their experiences that they've had in Peace Corps, and it's something that's very important to them. And you can see this throughout the report. And there was a lot of effort as well that people put into their responses, which can be seen throughout the report. So it is a very good read.
Great. Thank you so much, Miriam.
Thank you for having me.
The third person I want to call upon is Sierra Drummond. One of the things that excited me when we launched our efforts around the evacuees, our communications team came up with a program called Unfinished Business to profile RPCVs. And I think Vanessa mentioned earlier, telling that Peace Corps story when she was up on Capitol Hill. But this is another way that we are very excited about the possibilities of how to share the stories of evacuees as we move forward. And Sierra is one of the evacuees who so far has participated in this effort. And so Sierra, welcome, and talk a little bit about how you came about taking part in this initiative, and how'd you put your story together?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. I actually participated in the Unfinished Profile section because I was reached out to on Facebook. I was looking at the evacuee support page because I had a bit of an interesting experience with the evacuation. I happened to already be in America for my cousin's wedding. Obviously, that was a bit risky for me to be here in the midst of a pandemic, but it was still quite, I wouldn't say small, but it was less threatening at that point. So I just reached out in that group because I just was wondering if there was anyone else who was trying to, I guess, responsibly and respectfully evacuate or pause their service while in America and not really having the chance to say goodbye or pack up any belongings. So that opportunity to be a profile in this program was really special for me because it felt like I could put a bookmark on my work and kind of highlight it, and my community especially, and the things I learned, especially the cultural concepts. So I served in Thailand, and I'm looking to return, but just a lot of, which many of you know, a lot of the nature of the work we do is quite like imaginative, and I think that the way we learn how to advocate for the programs we want, or even just things we want to collaborate with our counterparts or our host country nationals, is actually skills that are quite relevant right now in the way we advocate for certain things, and obviously the injustices that are occurring right now, or are changing right now at least. So yeah, it was a really special and great opportunity for me to be a part of.
Yeah. And again, this is something that's ongoing, and maybe we can put in a link to those pages and in the chat line so people can see examples of it. And I know this is also referenced on the Global Reentry page. But again, it's not just a great storytelling by individuals, but it also serves as a great vehicle and tool that hopefully we can use going forward when we reach out to members of Congress. And the last person we wanted to introduce in this section is Brune Beringer, who is back as well and has been working on efforts to further gather information, promote the idea of Peace Corps, because we've got a long haul ahead of us, and the idea of mobilizing our evacuee community for future advocacy. So Brune, I'm gonna.
Hey everybody. Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, first of all, just great job, everybody. Those are really inspirational things that y'all have been doing. And so Jonathan and I had been talking about a month ago just to see how we could mobilize more evacuated volunteers and get information to them. And so we thought up of the idea of establishing a system where we have a leader from each cohort, where that person could disseminate information to the rest of their colleagues. And so once we get that done, we could get a database for any RPCVs, especially evacuees, who'd be interested in getting involved in advocacy efforts. And through that database, we could target our efforts. So for instance, if there's a specific congressional district represented by someone who's opposing legislation that supports the Peace Corps, we can reach out to those people individually and have an outsized impact.
And one of the things we've been talking about is, I know the idea of a survey is, we want to be cautious. You know, we talked with Miriam about a survey that really dealt on the kind of the current policy front. What's going on for evacuees, and what are some of the challenges that they faced, and what are some of the needs going forward. There's also, as I understand it, Peace Corps has just started issuing a survey checking in with the evacuees about you know, how the readjustment and issues coming home have been. And we're thinking about the idea of a survey that kind of, again, gives people the opportunity to share a little bit about their story, talk a little bit about potentially the domestic dividend they're providing. I know the WCAP's survey had a tremendous statistic about the high percentage of volunteers that indicated a willingness to try to help support volunteer efforts, particularly around the pandemic. And I think those kind of stories and that kind of data can be helpful moving forward for the long haul. So thank you, Brune, for that. And thanks to all four of you. And we know there's probably a lot of others that could share similar stories or stories of some nature, but we really wanted to highlight several of you. And now we want to just talk a little bit more about, you know, moving forward in various ways and what that might mean for you. And one is the opportunity to become, we have a volunteer role that was developed probably about 8 or 9 years ago of advocacy coordinators, either based in large cities or regions or statewide. And we have at least one and possibly two of the co-advocacy coordinators of the Northeastern New York Return Peace Corps Volunteer Group based up in the Albany, New York area. I know Sue Seneca is on. Is Anthony on as well? Well, Sue, I'm going to turn it over to you. And Sue is a former member of our board of directors, a former member of our advocacy committee on the board, and has just been a tremendous New York leader in efforts, especially in the Albany area, with our advocacy efforts up there. So Sue, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. And thank you for having me on this call. You know, Jonathan can say that it takes a team effort and that, you know, what he does wouldn't be worth much if the affiliate groups and the return volunteers weren't carrying it out. But he's absolutely wrong on that, because without Jonathan at the wheel of the advocacy mothership, we would all be out there flailing and reinventing the wheel and getting it all inaccurate and incomplete. So thank you, Jonathan. He provides the crucial critical mass of information and ways to be active that makes our jobs possible. So I want to tell you, just take a couple of minutes to take the lead on, I take the lead, that's my notes, because Anthony was supposed to be on here with me. I hope he joins us. But anyway, to tell you how our group has built robust advocacy, built on the tools and the guidance and leadership that NPCA gives us. And for anyone watching this on Global Reentry, I really urge you to connect with an affiliate group, whether it is your local group or a work group or an interest group, any one of the over how many, 150 different affiliate groups that are filled with returned volunteers to do advocacy and for other benefits as well. So I want to tell you the ways that we built our advocacy machine, so to speak, in our group. So here I go. So some of the things that we've done that have been really crucial to building this in our group, and our group is quite large. We have a pretty large rural area, basically. It goes to Vermont and almost down into an hour north of New York City. And we have regular contact and opportunities to learn about advocacy issues and actions. Here's how we do it. We have comprehensive, timely information from Jonathan, and it's great real-time info. We have an engaged, friendly, active group of return volunteers, and I think you could say that for pretty much all of the 250,000 return volunteers. In our group, we've got diverse ages and years of service. We've got people from the first years of Peace Corps all the way to evacuees. And it's a very friendly, supportive group. We like each other, we enjoy each other's company, we like our stories, and we like advocating together. We do regular contact once a month, first Tuesday of every month. We meet at someone's house, and even now our virtual meetings attract 35 to 50 people. And we have great leadership. We have energetic, upbeat president and vice president, and all of this together produces a real fertile ground for advocacy. So this is, I think, some of our strengths that I'll tell you about, and then I'll tell you some specific things that we do. So one thing we do is that everything we do for advocacy is routinely shared in a number of different ways, and we do it very concisely to not overwhelm people on issues, legislation, actions, past, present, and future. And we do that because we want to give everyone a sense of being involved and part of the action. We don't ask just who would like to be involved in advocacy and have a small subgroup. Everyone has a sense of being involved and part of the action, not only for those who actively participate, but also for the majority that may not ever actively participate. And we have enough people who are enthusiastic who get everyone else excited. We take time at the monthly meeting for advocacy explanations and updates and activities, little bits, not overwhelmed, not complex, but little bits, so that it's not surprising when we ask for something. They know where it fits in the cycle, where it fits in the process. Time during that monthly meeting, we often take for what we call flash activities, like letter writing or sending emails. We have our president sends out a weekly one-stop email to everyone in the group, which is hundreds and hundreds of people, and to pass on all kinds of information and a special section on advocacy. And she's really good about doing that and working with Anthony and me to pull together what would be the best things to ask our members to do without overwhelming them. And of course, we have two advocacy coordinators, so Anthony and I can tag team and we can expand our efforts and we can support each other and have each other's backs, and that makes a big difference. So here are some of the specific actions that we've done. And we're always trying to be imaginative and figure out more things. You know, most of our members have or had full-time jobs, and their lives are very complicated, like everyone's. So we don't want to ask so much of them that they choose to do none of it as much as they would like to. So some of our actions, I already mentioned, we devote time at a monthly meeting for an occasional flash activity of letter writing or sending email. We've done these kinds of activities before the regular meeting begins. We'll meet a half hour before. We've done it during the meeting. We've done it outside the meeting. And we make it easy. For example, the last in-person meeting we had, the first Tuesday of March, was at my house. And we had about 50 people here. And that was easy to have a flash activity. We took about half the meeting that night. Usually we have a potluck and a program presentation or a discussion. And we took about half of it to write letters. So I made it easy. I provided paper, pens, envelopes. I paid for the stamps and put together some quick read issue overviews, the letter templates and contact info and past support. And we all got dessert and another beverage, and we sat down and cranked for 20 minutes. And at the end, I had 35 letters to put in the mail and promises from several others to do the same. And they did, and emailed me the next day that they had finished their letters and done it. So in those weekly email blasts, we also include some of the same information, very condensed, links to NPCA for action. I always emphasize easy and quick. And that's a real benefit and strength of the NPCA action links that they provide. And over time, as we do these kinds of actions that don't take up a lot of time and don't ask a lot of effort, but have real influence and outcome, over time, people get familiar with the appropriation cycle, for example, or the legislative process, and they gain confidence, so that over time we've gained more and more people who have actively contributed with letters and phone calls and emails. And then also when they will get an alert, and sometimes outside of the weekly email, there'll be an alert because something needs to happen very quickly, it makes sense to them, and they know exactly why they're doing it and what they need to do, and they do it. We invite members to participate in everything we do, and anyone who wants to help and participate, we find something for them to do that has a real consequence. So we have people come to district meetings, for example, who never come to monthly meetings. They live too far away, but we have 4 congressional districts in our group area. So people come, that would never be able to drive the hour and a half each way to a monthly meeting, but it's easy for them to get to one of the district offices for an in-person meeting with their representative. And we also have proactive meetings with our congressional reps. We're really proactive in keeping on them because sometimes it takes quite a bit of time and going through several people sometimes to finally nail down a meeting with the member. We'll take a staff member if that's really the last resort, but we haven't had to so far. We've had the last 3 years we've been meeting with members. And we're in the process already to set up meetings for August and September, probably virtual meetings, but we'll be setting those up as well. So anyone who wants to help out in any way, we find something for them to do. And of course, there's National Days of Action that we go to and other things that we get involved in. But I think those are some of the main highlights of if you unpack our advocacy program for our little affiliate group. I think that's why it works.
Thank you, Sue. And Sue is one of approximately between 40 and 45 advocacy coordinators around the country. That may sound like a pretty good number, but we've got a lot of gaps and we've got a lot of opportunities. And in some cases, Sue mentioned that in Northeastern New York, they've devised a program where they've got 2 people serving as co-coordinators. That's not the case in a lot of our places, and that's, there are different models in which our advocacy coordinators can play and develop programming in their region. And they're really essential, and if it's something you might be interested in pursuing, becoming an NPCA advocacy coordinator, please follow up with myself, and we'd love to get you on board. We just had we right now are having Zoom calls about twice a month on average, and we just did one last night. And it's a program, I think, Sue, you'd agree, in some ways it ebbs and flows. It kind of there are periods of very, very busy times where we're going at you, almost on a daily basis. And then there are other points where it backs off a little bit. And so if you want to learn more about that, we'd be happy to share that with you, or find out about who the advocacy coordinator is in your area. And with that, when we talk about doing advocacy, when we talk about a volunteer leadership role like an advocacy coordinator, there's career implications for that. And I wanted to invite my 2 colleagues, Jody Hammer and Joel Rubin. Jody, if you've been on some of our global reentry programs, you already know Jody, who's our career specialist, and is just doing, along with Dan, fantastic work in getting this up and running. And we brought Joel on about 3 weeks ago, very skilled, very experienced, both on Capitol Hill and in different branches of government. We wanted to have somebody with a lot of skill sets, who knows a lot of people, because we know we're coming into a period of very big uncertainty. So we've contracted with Joel here for a period. And we wanted to hear from both of them about how advocacy work has potential benefits in your career development. So Jody, Joel?
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate that. And that actually will make mine even shorter here. You've already introduced me, so thank you for that. What I really want to say about advocacy and your career is, you may choose to get involved, because you believe in the cause. That's why you usually get involved in something, right? In advocacy, you believe in it, you believe in the cause. But I want to remind people that in addition to that being a great outcome, you can help affect change and ensure the sustainability of, an organization like Peace Corps or whatever you're doing advocacy for. There are career benefits as well. Advocacy is one of those skills that can be and often is utilized in so many different careers, not just people who have that in their title, but I consider it a transferable skill, really, where, learning to advocate for, make a case for yourself, your program, your students, your whatever your is, right, can be very, very helpful to communities, nonprofits. I mean, advocating for, funds, for support, all of that is so important that they love people who have experience in advocacy, even if it's not full-time experience. So that's really what I wanted to say to help you kind of think of the different benefits of getting involved, but also, remember that when you are going for different careers and such, you can actually look at your advocacy volunteer work, and that can be very helpful for you as well in developing that skill set. So without further ado, I want to really turn it over to Joel, who has a wealth of experience, and I want him to have the bulk of the time. So take it away.
Oh, that's kind of you. Thanks, Jody. And hi, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you. It's heartwarming to hear about all the things that you're doing back at home, especially the evacuated volunteers. And thank you for your service, and thank you for being out there. It's such an amazingly dynamic moment overseas for our country. So I'm grateful for it. And to Jonathan, of course, who in many ways helped inspire me to get into this space. Thank you for your leadership at NPCA all these years. I'll tell you very briefly a little professional bio and then to connect here. I've been working on or around Capitol Hill for close to 2 decades. I'm here in Washington area. And I should mention, I served in Costa Rica in 94 to 96 as an environmental ed volunteer, and came down to Washington after getting my graduate degree to work in the government. But I got involved in Peace Corps stuff. But I love Capitol Hill, and I love advocating. I love talking, and I have a feeling that all of us love promoting the things that we care about, our values, the kind of world that we're trying to change. And we're all advocates. You were advocates in your communities, and that's almost in many ways the ideal skill set for being an advocate for the Peace Corps and for the vision and the values of the Peace Corps. So for me, I've ended up working in positions, as Jody pointed out, how your career can really intertwine with advocacy, where I've worked on Capitol Hill in the Senate. I worked as a senior official in the State Department in the Obama administration, where I was responsible for the State Department's work with the House of Representatives. I've been, for 6 years, I was an advocate as a policy and a political director in several nonprofit organizations in international work. J Street and the Plowshares Fund are 2 of them. And really the skills that I used every day were the skills that I think I learned in the Peace Corps, in terms of communicating briefly, having an emotional reason for why I'm there. Why do I want to be there? What is it I'm trying to achieve? And being able to, I believe, help impact and change minds of those who are making decisions that actually impact the issue upon which I'm advocating. So the fun story is that I hadn't really gone to Capitol Hill at all when I was in Washington for my first couple of years. And yet I was a group leader. I was in the RPCVW community, Washington RPCV group here. And I got hooked into the lobby day, the advocacy day that Jonathan organized. And I went up to the Hill, and I'd never lobbied the Hill before. And I sat in this room, and I felt completely overwhelmed and stunned by the concept that I was sitting in a committee room in the US Senate with senior staffers who were deciding what the budget would be for the Peace Corps. when I just only a few years prior been a volunteer out in the field, wondering about how these decisions are made in the capitals. And, the world is small. So the people who I was lobbying are, they were the senior staff to then the senior Democrat on the Foreign Relations Committee, Joe Biden. And over the years, I've developed a relationship working with them. And it was in many ways because of that first interaction. And I think that's the takeaway where I'll stop there, because I know we're going to go further. But I really encourage all of you, as what Jody was pointing to think about advocacy as a skill you already have, and to to match that skill, integrate that skill with the passion that drives you and drove you to join the Peace Corps. And so when you're talking to your colleagues about joining in on advocacy, they already have it. What we're doing and what the MPCA is doing is harnessing that power to ensure that the vision and the values that the Peace Corps represents and that we believe in continue into the future. So it's great stuff. I'm glad you're on this call, and really excited to continue talking for the rest of the Zoom call.
Thank you, Jody, and thank you, Joel. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of the road ahead as we see it. But before we do, let's take a break and see if there are any questions that have come in, or expectations of what people wanted to come away with today that we may not have covered. I don't know if Jody, you or Dan are monitoring anything that's come in.
Sure, Jonathan, I just put a reminder out saying, asking folks to enter questions. I was culling through what we had, and I didn't see many questions yet, but I can go back up to the expectations part in a moment here. But everyone, please feel free to dump whatever questions you have into the chat box, and Jonathan and others will certainly answer as many as they can. So let me just go up while people are entering those and see. All right. In the beginning, several people, put comments like, always, happy to learn more about advocacy and hope to promote more advocacy actions on the part of the RPCV community. Hope to learn more about how to be an active and effective proponent of national service and other relevant issues. That's a good one as well. Yeah.
Great. Well, why don't we'll do some interruptions here, because I know we're about 10 minutes away from the hour. I think we've got several things we wanted to touch base on here in terms of moving forward, and we can kind of take breaks in between this if there's any. Jody, just jump in.
Sure.
If there's any questions.
I'll watch the chat box for questions, and I'll let you know.
Great. So what's down the road? Well, first of all, and Miriam was noting this, there is legislation out there. Most of you are probably familiar with it. There's a lot of legislation out there, actually, a number of bills that have been presented. These 4 bills, 2 in the Senate, 2 in the House, are just among several others. And there's a lot of intersection of those bills, a lot of commonalities of those bills. And I'll just summarize the bills by saying it. If I were to summarize them, it seems like there are 3 things that are mentioned in many or most of the bills that deal with Peace Corps. First of all, there's a number of bills that have a representation to the issue of ongoing healthcare needs. In particular, an extension of the opportunity, if is so needed or desired, to, I think right now you have a 3-month window, 2 months of purchased healthcare from Peace Corps. And then I know Peace Corps also provided that, I forget exactly what it was called, but it was like a $1,500 health stipend, as I understand it. And then I think there was at least 1 more month in which you could purchase the post-service healthcare offering. There are some parts of the legislation that talk about trying to expand out those opportunities. The second thing that is very much present and goes to the question of national service is a lot of interest, a lot of momentum, I believe, in the idea of trying to engage not just Peace Corps, but definitely Peace Corps volunteers, definitely AmeriCorps volunteers, and especially referencing evacuees in pandemic response efforts. A number of bills are talking about that in big ways and small. And so that's another item that tries to, I think, address some of the issues around job opportunities, whether it might be with a federal agency or if it's crafted some other way. And then the third item is the question of redeployment. Elements of legislation talking about the need for Peace Corps to, try to get back in the field as soon as practicable, and also speaking to the need to address the desire of those evacuees who want to come back and serve, to expedite their re-entry into Peace Corps service. So that's kind of the main cruxes of the legislation that are out there. There's a couple of other items that are referenced as well, and that's not to say there won't be more moving forward. It's kind of an ongoing effort. So that's one thing that is very imminent. Congress is working, and it sounds like July is going to be a month where there's going to be possible movement on more pandemic response. And we are hearing from some of the sponsors of this legislation saying to us, can you help us get more co-sponsors on our Peace Corps legislation? And that is something we are going to be trying to do here very shortly. And we're going to be trying to do it on a very targeted manner. So trying to look at key lawmakers. So you might not see big announcements about this, but you might be approached if you live in a particular state and have a particular lawmaker that we think is on the verge or critical to trying to co-sponsor legislation. So a lot coming up on that on the very immediate horizon. Joel's going to talk about the appropriation for Peace Corps, which is also not too far down the line. Joel?
It always seems to happen at the same time. I'll be real brief. The appropriation, of course, is the funny way of saying the money for the agency. And as Jonathan put there, FY 2021, meaning the fiscal year 2021, which technically begins on October 1 of this coming year of 2020. Try not to confuse you too much, but essentially that's the end state goal. Now the budget was submitted and the agency requested an amount through the president's budget. It was submitted in February, and the agency, as it always does, is it lowballed the request. It asked for $401 million. And last year, the Congress was asked for by the agency $396 million, but Congress gave $410. So Congress, independently, it has the power of the purse, and it decided to increase that request by $15 million, which enabled the numbers to be at about 7,300 volunteers in the field. And so there's a difference here. There's a discrepancy. NPCA wants the higher budget. The agency may want the lower budget. We don't take marching orders from the agency. There are a lot of reasons for that, legal as well. But from an NPCA perspective, we want the most robust budget possible. So these advocacy activities are undertaken independently. The short of it is that hearings are supposed to have happened in the committees that handle the money, the Appropriations Committee. There was one budget hearing in early March for Secretary of State Pompeo that sort of gets into this general space, but that was in the Foreign Affairs Committee, then COVID hit. So there's a lot of slowdown there. And Jonathan's right, it's going to speed up really fast. And hopefully the bill gets through the House and then it goes over to the Senate side, because funding bills originate in the House. And the goal then is to have this all done, and most likely it'd have to be before the election. If not, they'll have a continuing resolution of the current funding levels, and then they would probably in the lame duck period after the next election come to a number. So this requires a lot of hand-holding, a lot of tracking, a lot of engagement with the appropriations members, with our key allies there, to ensure that our equities, the Peace Corps budget, are at top of mind by these members, and a lot of persistence on an ongoing basis. And then you don't know when it's going to happen, and then boom, things are going to break really fast. Sorry, Jonathan.
No, that's great.
I love appropriations.
Yeah. And let's just do a check-in with Jody. Any questions?
Yes,
Yes.
there are some questions. Let's see, there's one here asking about the day-to-day. I have a question. This is from Sue. How do we balance the day-to-day and previous advocacy efforts with current issues facing evacuated volunteers? I think that's a really good question. And I would even add to it a third part: while doing a job search and trying to move forward with your life all at once. So yeah, again, a repeat of it. How do we balance the day-to-day and previous advocacy efforts with current issues facing evacuated volunteers? Because there are many.
Yeah, and thank you, Sue. And I think one of the things that Sue is referring to is prior to the pandemic, there was a number of other pieces of legislation that are before Congress dealing with matters pertaining with everything from some women's health issues in the field to a general authorization bill for Peace Corps that covers some health needs for returning volunteers and other provisions. And I'll be quite honest, we've felt the need to make sure that the evacuees we wanted to make sure that those needs were met as they came back and that the costs were covered. I think there will be a period where we will pivot back to some of those issues. I think it's not quite yet. There's a couple of angles where we're looking. If there's something from a previous part of the legislation that is a good fit, that fits in with kind of the theme of pandemic response. But we're not abandoning those other pieces of legislation. And there's opportunities that we will, in a couple of cases, where we may try again to do things in a very targeted manner to help move them along as best we can. Other questions?
Yes, we have a few more. We have one on the Peace Corps response to, the recent, injustices and all of that. And I'm going to actually hold that one until just after this one, because we're almost at the top of the hour. This one, the question here is any updates on the United Act? I haven't seen or read any personally, but was wondering if someone else caught something that I might have missed. So Philip entered that.
Yeah, I think it's referred to as the Unite Act. And I'm gonna be, it is one of the bills. I forget which one of those 4 bills up there is the Unite Act, but it is one of the ones that we are working on. And there has not been too much. If you saw one of the things with the next, the House has moved forward with what they've called the HEROES Act, which is kind of their next round of stimulus. And they made a decision to have the HEROES Act be very much, almost fully, completely focused on domestic matters. Now, we can argue that some of these Peace Corps matters are domestic, and I think that argument is being made. So right now, what the sponsors of the Unite Act and other legislation are asking is, help us build momentum, help us get more co-sponsors so we can bring these bills to committee to get them moving along. And that's one of the things we're going to be doing here, especially over the next few weeks.
Great.
Can we hold the other question and please remind me of it? Because I want to—
Sure, you have just a little more to do, right?
Yeah, we're going to quickly
Sure.
go through these next 3. We'll see if we can do them in a minute or less. Joel, so Joel, you've got the assignment for making the case for Peace Corps' future. I'll give you 2 minutes on that one, though.
Nah, you got to get the 45-second pitch. I mean, the reason for the Peace Corps' future is that it advances global peace, and it ensures that America's role in the world is engaged and active, and that we are building partnerships on behalf of the American people, and then bringing those lessons learned back home. And it's always been a bit of an episodic argument. For a number of years recently, the international development community linked into the value to American national security. We don't like doing that national security, but I've heard from enough congressional staff over the years that they want to understand, why should US dollars go to the Peace Corps? How does it help us? And we say it does help our security because we're building friendships, relationships, partnerships, and alliances, and training a brilliant group of Americans when we come back home. And we're going to need that passion. Look, at the end of the day, having an integration of people who do it and do the work like you, who go in person, who talk in person and make the case, is just a tremendous value added versus setting up talking points and hoping that they register into the member or the staffer's head. And getting that message out with passion and explaining it and how it means something, that's how we do it. And we're going to have to make that case about the future of the Peace Corps, because now that everyone's back at home and the budgets are going to be tighter, we're all going to be competing for less dollars. And we're going to need every single person who cares about the future of the Peace Corps to explain why it has to be part of our face to the world.
And very important to also note that when we talk about Peace Corps' future, we're also going to be talking to you and to people all throughout our community about what should the Peace Corps' future look like. We're coming up on the 60th anniversary, and you're going to be hearing a lot more in the weeks and months to come, because we want to have a conversation. And evacuees, my goodness, you play such a critical role in this matter, because you've got the freshest experience. So, what's working with Peace Corps, what's not? What are the different ways that we need to be approaching programming and other issues as Peace Corps moves forward? So that's going to be a big part as well. 100,000 messages to Congress. I can do this in 30 seconds. We, through our software system, I look back at it, and we were able to calculate that over the last 5 years, our community has sent roughly 90,000 plus messages to Congress over a 5-year period. We've got to ramp that up. We've got to up our game, whether it's in other ways of communicating or not, through meetings or phone calls or whatever. And our goal that we're setting for ourselves, the challenge we put out, is let's do 100,000 messages in this calendar year. We're at got a ways to go. We're somewhere between 15 and 20,000 messages so far. We got to pick up the pace, and that's going to involve all of us. And there's certainly going to be plenty for us to be reaching out about. Virtual district advocacy meetings. You heard Sue Seneca talk about their group in Northeastern New York is already doing district meetings, planning for them. They may need to be virtual this time around. And it's something we really often try to promote during the months of August, September, and it's certainly something where we encourage you to either organize or join. And Joel, how important are those district office meetings?
Yeah, I'll be real brief. They're essential. At the end of the day, members of Congress care about one thing, and that's getting reelected to Congress. And to get reelected, they need voters from their districts to support them. And speaking to your member or their staff in their district when you are a constituent of that member is extraordinarily powerful. They value it, they need it. They love the photographs, they stick it up on the website, they love getting applause from the community, they love op-eds, they talk about how wonderful this member is on issues of global peace. And making that contact, that direct, it's a contact sport. And so making that contact with your district representative is something they won't forget. And it just builds a relationship. And that relationship is at the end of, and I've said at the end of the day, I said it too much, but that relationship is central to ensuring that when the moment comes for votes or for signing onto a letter or for convincing other members to go a certain way, that relationship will come in handy. And that's because of the direct in-district, in-person meetings.
And last and certainly not least, other issues, other opportunities. In closing on this slide and closing on the formal presentation, there are several of our affiliate groups that are cause-related groups, and they are active on key issues that have impact for ourselves and our global community. There is a group, RPCVs for Environmental Action, and I believe on Monday, this next Monday, they will be hosting a town hall gathering of people that are interested, RPCVs, in finding what the community can do around the critical issue of climate change. RPCVs for Refugees is another group that has been very active and growing over the past 5 years, doing work on issues around immigration and refugee policy. And then certainly in the last few weeks, the issue of criminal injustice and the need for reforms has taken hold of our community, taken hold of our country. And most of you saw our statement, and I can tell you that Glenn, our president, is absolutely committed and to do the work that we need to do internally as an organization and a staff to try to be addressing the issues within ourselves, and also trying to work on what we can do better as a community and in engaging on this issue. And with that, I wanted to turn back to Jody. I want to say thank you to all of our participants and for being with us and everyone who's joined us. Jody, I know there was a question.
Sure. Yep. The one question that we held until this point, which is perfect because you were just talking about the issue and such. And it was a very good question raised by Adam, and I had it right here. And it was in the recent, says in the Peace Corps evac, the COVID-19 Facebook group, there was quite a backlash to Peace Corps, as in the agency, I think is what you're talking about, Peace Corps' recent official statement on current events and protests, that Peace Corps is not going far enough to actually say Black Lives Matter, and they're asking for thoughts. And I can turn that back. I was going to ask, and I actually sent that question to both Joel and to Dan, and Dan had actually put, you might have seen everyone on the chat box, but his response was basically echoing what Jonathan has already articulated in terms of, NPCA has definitely pivoted on that issue and really, alongside the Black Lives Matter movement, and expressed to its board of directors earlier this week that racial justice is now a top priority for NPCA. And so we're very committed to that cause and working toward it. And as Jonathan said, working internally in our own agency organization, our own personal lives, and as an agency and work toward it. Yeah. Overall. So anyone else want to add to that? And it certainly could be any of you at this point. I would say if you would want to take yourself off mute and articulate yourself, that's perfectly fine.
Thanks, Jody, for reading my comment there. And in fairness to Adam, his question was a little bit more along the lines of what is Peace Corps doing and the criticism that Peace Corps is getting online, especially on the Facebook group, et cetera, yeah. For the statement that they put out. And in fairness to those comments, we do not disagree with any of them, and we've had a lot of we are not Peace Corps, so we can't right. ask them to do things. We can ask them to do things differently, which we will definitely be doing. Glenn has regular conversations with the director, and we'll definitely be expressing our concerns and our community's concerns around what we're hearing about the experience for African-American volunteers in the Peace Corps. Jonathan, Joel, anything to add to that?
Yeah, the thing I'll just add, and I know, there's differing opinions on this, and I absolutely understand. I do know that the agency's in a really tough spot here. Going back to what Joel said about, the appropriation that Peace Corps, submitted, and that's through the president and the administration putting forth cuts. And they cannot, traditionally, whether it's whoever's the president and their policies stand, or you're gone, in essence. I think if is often the case. The Peace Corps director in previous administrations can't go up to Capitol Hill and say, gee, I know we're saying here we want this much money, but we really want this much money. That's a very tough, and I don't think there's ever been a tougher situation than this. You can fairly argue that it's time to take a stand, but I just say, do understand that they are, I'm sure there are a lot of people that would like to say, and I think somebody raised the question of, has any other agency even come out with any kind of statements? Perhaps, but we're not sure. And I know, again, this is why we're, an independent voice on matters of the Peace Corps community.
Yeah, if I can add to that real quick, just on the budget request thing. I mean, it's the agencies from an internal the way it works is that the agency submits a request to the White House in the fall for the subsequent year, and then it goes back and forth with the Office of Management and Budget, and then the agency gets its final number. The Office of Management and Budget, the White House determines that number through a whole exercise of looking at the entire foreign affairs portfolio and whatnot. And so internally, the agency may be interested in higher numbers like ours or like MPCA's, but if they get outside of what is officially requested, then they're crossing the White House. And so their hands really are tied in all these issues. But as an RPCV, I feel frustration about language when I look at what the agency says, but understanding that this is the government. It is a unique agency within the government, but nonetheless, everything it does has to go by the White House. And so people probably understand what that means in terms of the limitations on what the agency's language can be. Although they can do it, but then there are consequences as well, repercussions if they defy the White House. So that's where we come in handy as the outside outlet for the Peace Corps community.
Jody, anything else?
Great. I think that pretty much addresses the questions. There was another comment in there just, indicating, thank you for being willing to address it openly, and this and other aspects of white saviorism in Peace Corps are tremendous topics for discussion on social media currently. And then they said maybe in a future Peace Corps Connect conference, there would be space for that aspect. And so I think that's a very good comment. Thank you, Adam, for sharing that, and for the others for sharing that as well. So I think that's very good feedback. What I do want to remind everyone before people start leaving, because we certainly respect your time and we know that it is after the hour of 6 o'clock out here on the East Coast. So certainly understand if you need to drop off, but seems like most of you have held in there the whole time. So thank you so much for staying here. We do want to remind you to do the chat box. You can save the chat box, the comments, because there are some really good, I think, comments in there, some links to resources. And to do that, you just go to the chat box, and on the bottom right-hand corner, you see that where there's 3 dots in a box. Click on that, and the very first one generally will say Save Chat. And you can just save the chat. There's a folder on your, whatever your, if you're on a laptop or whatever, for Zoom chats, so that you can refer to that in the future if you want. So just want to remind folks of that. And then this recording will also be posted for anyone, again, as Dan said, online, where you could go back in the future or refer your friends, you talk to. And that's the last thing that I want to say is, the global reentry program. We're doing a lot of different types of, career things. And this is just a great, I love this one, on advocacy, because I see everyone as being able to be advocates, and we need everyone to advocate. So, encourage your friends, your cohort, others to go and watch the program and see if they get something out of it as well as tap into any of our programming. And you can certainly find out, more about and join the Global Reentry Program for free on the website, And our upcoming events are all on the events page, which is just peacecorpsconnect.org/events. We have generally three career webinars per week, plus other special ones like this. So thank you, everyone. And Jonathan, I'm turning it back to you as the facilitator.
Yeah, I think we can, I see there's at least one other comment that's come in. I'm happy to stay on for a little bit, and we'll probably end the recording now. So I'll just say thank you, and we'll stop the recording.